Hello and welcome to this episode of the Minding Minds podcast, where we're empowering people to live happier and more fulfilled lives. I'm Dave Russell of TheMindCoach.ie and criticalfrequencycoaching.com, and I'm here again with my guest host Jason Cooper of JasonCooper.ie.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting me in here again, and I'm really looking forward to this next podcast that we're going to have.
Excellent. Today's podcast is all about the topic of anxiety and stress. And I'm really looking forward to that. That's a kind of area of expertise for myself.
And you've had your own experiences of anxiety yourself, isn't that right?
Yeah, well, I practiced anxiety for many years, and I was practicing it, I think, even before I knew exactly what it was.
So you're an expert at it, really. So you really know how to do it properly.
I know it from the inside out. I had to learn how to deal with and overcome my own anxiety, which I suppose was primarily triggered in a work scenario for me.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting.
I didn't always do this, like yourself. I didn't always do this. I had a career before this. Mm-hmm. I used to work in a bank for many years. For most of my career was spent working in a bank.
Well, that would make you anxiety. I can feel it already.
I think most people start to get anxious even when they hear the word bank mentioned in a sentence. But there was me spending every single day of my working life going into a bank. And I used to work as a trader in the dealing room.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, I used to trade foreign exchange. So I used to deal in the financial markets. So that was a stressful enough job as it was. I used to place bets basically with the bank's money, with attempting to make money, to make more money, make a profit. And it was quite a stressful job. Mm-hmm. And I suppose the intensity of that job triggered, first of all, it just started as stress. It was a stressful job.
Of course.
That kind of became chronic stress, and that triggered in me, it triggered anxiety then.
So what does it actually feel like to have anxiety in yourself? What's the process? What happened?
Yeah. Well, anxiety is, it's strange because I can explain what it was like for me. It's different for everybody. But for me, the way anxiety manifested in my life was a constant negative, challenging internal dialogue.
And which was what?
Well, it was on a daily basis. It used to question decisions that I would make in work. It used to make me, it used to make me kind of question everything that people would say to me, feel there was some sort of ulterior reason or method. I was always negative. I could only ever see the negative outcome or potential outcome in something. And it became a constant companion of this negative little...
So it's like a monkey on your shoulder telling you to do bad stuff to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It was just that monkey, as you call it, I used to think was little devil. He used to remind me of the Tom and Jerry show, where you'd have the little devil on one shoulder and you used to have the little angel on the other shoulder, whispering good things and whispering bad things. But I used to never have that angel. I used to always have the devil that was always kind of talking down to me. And that, it manifested itself, I suppose, in various different ways. My immune system had a tendency to be quite low. I was always feeling I was catching every bug that was going. I used to always have, in particularly stressful times, I'd have a very dicky tummy. I'd always have these overwhelming negative emotions and underlying.
And how did that make you feel?
It was just, it's just so uncomfortable because you feel like you're not in control of your own mind, which is a horrible sensation. Mm-hmm. And here was me. I thought that I was a relatively intelligent individual. I was very successful in my career. I had a high profile job. I was doing what I loved or thought that I loved. And here I was coming home every night feeling miserable.
So what was the point that saying to yourself, enough was enough? What happened? What happened at that particular moment? Maybe it was your eureka moment. Maybe it was a moment at that particular time that made you go.
That kind of threshold moment. Yeah. I suppose I had a number of threshold moments. Mm-hmm. I suppose some particular incidences in work that really threw me. Well, the one where I first started realizing that I was suffering from stress, and here was a strange one, and it's a date that everybody will remember and know. It was September 11th.
Oh yeah.
2001, and I was sitting at my desk watching the events unfold on the TV screen in the dealing room. And I remember as I was sitting there, that absolute empty feeling that I felt in the pit of my stomach, because I'm sure everybody did. I had this kind of cold sweat, and my heart is racing. I had a bit of a shakes as well, but I knew I had to sit at my desk because I still had a job to do in that situation. But I had this uncontrollable urge to run away.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. Uncontrollable urge to run away, but I couldn't. I was stuck there. I was nearly frozen. And strangely enough, it was many years later that I realized that, a colleague of mine an old friend of mine actually, not a colleague, was having a very similar reaction.
Really?
At that
wow.
moment
In parallel to yourself.
In parallel, yeah. But there was one significant difference between what was happening to me and the environment that he was in, as he was actually in Manhattan on that day at that time.
Ouch.
And he was actually trying to escape from one of the buildings and come through the lower streets of Manhattan. And what was happening for both of us is we were having our natural stress response triggered.
Yep.
All right. The difference being is that he was in immediate danger physically. I was 3,000 miles away from that danger, sitting at a desk, and I was perfectly safe in that environment, but I was having the exact same reaction that he was having. Heart palpitations, cold sweats, the shakes, uncontrollable urges to run. But his was a very adaptive response. He needed to do that at that moment of time. He needed to escape. And it was that stage that, having those reactions to what I was seeing on TV, that really started to drill home to me what underpins and underlines stress and anxiety.
The thing is, probably back then, like even the word anxiety, for me, builds palpitations up in me straight away. It's not a really nice word to use. And I'm sure the stigma at that particular time is more accepted now, but even so, the word, if you're suffering anxiety, you must be that sort of person.
Yeah.
That's a really bad stigma, but we all have it.
Yeah. Well,
all have it.
Yeah. I mean, the stigma still exists. We have started the conversation in this country and elsewhere. We've started a conversation, but it needs to develop from there.
Yeah.
The problem is I don't think that most people know exactly what that conversation is and what it should be.
Yeah.
For me, it has to start with education about exactly what is stress and anxiety. Yeah. And ultimately what stress is and what anxiety is, it's the inappropriate triggering of the body's natural stress response. Now, see, the thing is, we all have, as human beings, we have a natural stress response in our body.
Of course.
It's become known as the fight or flight response. Yep. Now, that's a very cute way of explaining it, because it's so much more than that. And if we think of it like this, every animal has some sort of stress response.
Yep.
Some sort of action that happens automatically within their body when they encounter danger. Now, this could be something like, you've seen lizards who lose their tails.
Yep.
If they're being caught, for example, or a possum that plays dead and emits a smell to discourage animals from attacking, or even some fish that can change the color of their scales and their skin.
So, explain this process for human people.
So that's the mammalian evolution, animal evolution, in various different ways. When it comes to humans, we have evolved over the last couple of 100,000 million years. And most of that time was spent as hunters and gatherers in the plains of Africa. And we would have encountered in those times different types of dangers to what we would have encountered today.
Of course.
So it might have been the proverbial lion or the tiger on the plains of Africa. Or maybe it's a warring tribes person, or maybe it's somebody from your own tribe, or maybe it's a natural disaster. But whatever it was, 99.9% of the time, it was a physical threat that we were encountering. And as a result of that, we evolved a physical stress response. So a stress response that is designed to help us, or has evolved to help us to deal with the most common types of stresses that we would have encountered. So physical stresses.
That makes sense. So fortunately enough, nowadays, the tigers and the dinosaurs are not trying to eat us now.
Yeah. But I suppose
we've evolved.
We've evolved in, the modern world has evolved.
Yeah.
But if we look back, to the kind of evolutionary man on the plains of Africa, what would happen is you go out hunting, if you're antelope on the plains of Africa or something like that, and you encounter a tiger, or a lion or whatever sort of wild animal you might encounter. And a certain part of your brain, the very oldest primitive parts of your brain, kick into action there. And effectively what they do is they make some serious biological, neurological and physical changes in your body in order to make you best equipped to deal with that threat.
Yep.
So they redirect resources all around your body, and resources in terms of blood and oxygen and glucose, right? And they redirect those from the systems that don't particularly need them at that moment in time, and whether that's your reproductive system, your digestive system, your immune system, but most importantly as well, your cognitive thinking brain, the most modern part of the brain. They redirect those to the big muscles in your arms, your chest and your leg to be able to allow you fight or flight.
Run like hell,
or fight for your life.
Yeah,
right? And the reason being is that older part of your brain has been part of us ever since we were lizards crawling out of the muck.
Yeah.
So in that situation, it kicks in and says, hey, by the way, I've been doing this longer. I'm not going to leave it to you, the thinking part of the brain, to get us out of this situation, because you're going to overanalyze this stuff. What we need action now. So it kind of hijacks the thinking part, the neocortex part of your brain. It hijacks that, and it redirects all of these resources to your legs and your arms and your chest to allow you to run like hell or fight to the death.
So unfortunately nowadays, like in the modern world, everything's slightly
different. Yeah. Because 99.9% of the time, we're not encountering physical stresses. Our tigers are no longer physical. Our tigers are being stuck in traffic, right? Having deadlines to work to, being able to pay the bills, pay the mortgage, the relationship stresses, financial stresses, or even just finding Wi-Fi. We all know that kind of stress when we can't get a good.
I know that one completely. Can be very frustrating.
And what happens is these register as threats to the brain, right? And then what happens? The brain goes, I know exactly what you need. You need to fight or flight, and you're kind of going, that's actually the last thing that I need in this situation. Because one, it's not a physical threat that I'm dealing with. And two, because I've had my stress response triggered and I'm not using my full neocortex, I'm now in a worse position to deal with this psychological threat than I was in the first place.
It's not automatic anymore. It's not like change your, do this and do that, but you're in a civilized world now and not running around with the animals as we used to many years ago. But we've come from where we had really evolved very quickly. And as you said, the environment around us has evolved, but we haven't.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we put kind of human evolution on a 24-hour clock, if we look at what's happened since we came from the plains of Africa and we started to populate the rest of the world in the modern and all the developments since, that's probably only the last 1 to 5 minutes before midnight. We have spent so much of our evolution as a species as hunter-gatherers, living in a non-technical, non-civilized world where physical threats were all around us. Now it's flipped on its head, and it's done so in such a short space of time that from an evolutionary point of view, we haven't had time to catch up. And not only have we not had time to catch up, there's a good chance that we may never catch up because the world is now developing and changing at such a fast pace. So when anxiety strikes, that's the stress response in a nutshell. When anxiety strikes, it's when that response becomes habitual in response to certain triggers. And those triggers can be any one of a million different things. That's why anxiety can be so cruel for people, is because there are so many different things that can actually trigger anxiety. And for a lot of people, they may not even know what it is.
And you might not recognize that it is anxiety. Like I've had a little bit myself in the past. But what would you say to all those people out there that are just saying, anxiety, get over yourself. Come and you'll be right. Just do whatever you need to be doing. Get over it. Go and have a chat to someone in the pub or whatever. Something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
What would you say to all those people out there that are listening to this podcast now? And they might even have it, or they might know someone else that's actually had it. What would you say? Because the power of positive thinking is good to a certain degree, like positive. It doesn't really work.
Yeah.
What would you say to those people out there?
Well, the issue kind of starts around a lack of understanding. As I always say to people, and this is what part of the thing that drives the stigma is, most people who are suffering from anxiety don't actually understand exactly what it is themselves.
Of course.
Right? So if you're suffering, and I didn't for years, this is what I fell into, the category I fell into. If you don't understand what anxiety is yourself and you're suffering from it, how can you expect somebody else who isn't? Mm-hmm. How can you expect them to actually understand exactly what's going on?
And they don't. Generally, they don't.
And they don't.
Yeah.
You know, and they're all well-intentioned and well-meaning when they say, you shouldn't get stressed out over that.
And they give you advice and they go, well, you should be doing this or doing that. The advice isn't really practical. It gives for what we know and what we understand. It goes straight over your head.
Yeah, most people will say, they'll look at a situation that causes stress for somebody, and they're always getting, and the advice is, why are you getting so stressed about it? It's not really that stressful, which for somebody who's suffering from stress, chronic stress or anxiety is probably the worst thing that they can hear.
Absolutely.
The reason being is they really know that they shouldn't be getting stressed or anxious about this, and this thing, whatever the trigger is, shouldn't be triggering anxiety.
But that's in their mind and not your mind.
Yeah, but it is. Yeah. So now not only are they suffering from the anxiety, but they're also suffering from a degree of embarrassment, shame, or stress over the fact that they're getting stressed out about and anxious about something that shouldn't be causing stress and anxiety for them. So it doubles up. So we've got to be very careful when we're talking with people about anxiety. If we don't understand what it is, it's very difficult, and we shouldn't be giving advice. The best thing that you can do in that situation is to be more understanding.
What were people saying to you at the particular time when you were really into it? Because you're an expert at having anxiety. You remember that.
It was my hobby at the time.
It was your hobby at the time, and you got a master's in having anxiety. What were people saying to you? What were your friends saying to you? What was your wife saying to you?
Well, here's the interesting thing about me when I suffered from anxiety is I never told anybody about it. I suffered.
You kept it to yourself. That's really selfish of you. That really was very selfish of you.
I didn't want to share.
You didn't want to share. You just wanted to have it all to yourself. That's very selfish.
I didn't tell anybody what was going on.
I don't blame you.
It was, I was ashamed of what was going on because I was ashamed that I might have a mental health disorder, right? This is me coming from, a very uneducated standpoint at that moment in time. I was ashamed of what was going on in my own head.
Everyone thinks the same because they don't want to be seen to be, you're the person that has the mental issue or whatever it might. Yeah. You overthink it and you overthink what the other person is actually thinking, but really it's just a passing thought in their head and it's gone.
Yeah. But when I fully understand that what was happening for me was the inappropriate triggering of this natural stress response and that had become habitual in me. Yeah. And that I had never been given the tools to deal with that. Because strangely enough, we go through, at minimum in this country, a minimum of 14 years of full-time education. From the age of 4 up through primary school, secondary school, and then a lot of people go on to college. Yep. So, but a minimum of 14 years of full-time education. And in all of those 14 years, particularly in my time through that education, not one day, not 1 hour of one of those days over those 14 years was ever spent teaching me about how my mind worked.
They never, ever, and it's still today that it's not being taught, and I think it's hugely important. Yeah, you talk about how to do maths, you talk about how to do English or whatever it is, but really to master your own head is probably the most important thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, you're starting to see it now. I have a daughter. She's 6 years old, and even she's started to learn some mindfulness in school. They do a little bit of that, which is cool. Good. But that's starting to happen. But again, mindfulness is just one tool.
Of course.
It's not understanding how your mind works and how to take control of it. And until you understand how your mind works and how to take control of it, it's very difficult for you to start to take control over your own anxiety and stress.
So what I'd like to ask you, I'm really curious to know, like, just imagine me now and we're in a situation that I've got it and I've got it really badly and I'm in my head a lot or whatever. And I'm starting to think the world is against me or whatever. what sort of things that could you do to me?
Right. Well, I've a process that I actually work people through. It's part of a program that I do. I call it the 3 pathways approach.
Okay.
And effectively, that's, before I get on to what the actual 3 pathways are, I start by explaining to everybody in detail exactly how the stress response happens in our body.
Okay. Interesting.
Understanding, first of all, a bit of background about how stress is manifesting in people's lives, and not just what's going on for them mentally, but what's going on for them in their lives physically and also emotionally. Because when I understand that, and then I explain to them how the stress response actually occurs in the body.
So what is that particular, or what does that actually mean?
Which part now?
The stress response.
Right, the stress response. So that's understanding the fight or flight.
Okay.
And on all the now, I gave you the 60-second version of it a few minutes ago, but there's so much more to it than that allows you to understand all the physical symptoms that you're having when you're suffering from anxiety, all of the thought processes that are going on in your head when you're suffering from anxiety, and all of the emotions that you're experiencing when you're suffering from anxiety. And you're able to map those to the stress response and understand how that stress response is causing all of these things. Now, we move from there to actually understanding how it's triggered in the brain. And what I mean by that is there's 3 different ways.
So I'm curious to know what do you actually mean by that? So I know my brain's all over the place and I have thousands and thousands of thoughts every day, but could you explain the process that you do to me?
Yeah. So the 3 pathways.
Yeah.
Okay. So the way that I like to imagine it is, let's look at it this way. We've got effectively 3 brains. We don't have one brain. We have 3 brains. We have the oldest part, the reptilian brain, which is, as we talked about before, that's where the fight or flight is actually triggered. That older part, the reptilian brain, actually triggers, it manages your heartbeat, it manages your breathing, it looks after every single cell in your body. It does billions upon billions upon billions of executions all of the time, every single day, keeping you alive, all totally unconscious. You don't have to think about keeping your heart beating. You don't have to think about breathing. You don't have to think about repairing all the cells in your body.
Walking down the street. You just do it.
Yeah, it just happens. Then wrapped around that, we've got the midbrain, which is more the emotional brain.
Okay.
And it's also the seat in where we have memories developed, because memories associated with emotion are all developed there in the midbrain. And then we've got the cognitive brain, which is the ridged-like structure that you'll see. It looks like a walnut. You'll have seen that from pictures in biology books.
Yes, I remember.
So that's the neocortex. That's the modern thinking part of the brain. So the way that I like to think of the 3 brains is you've got the thinking, you've got the feeling, and then you've got the doing. The thinking being the neocortex, you've got the feeling being the emotional brain in the middle, and then you've got the doing being the senses and all that. Yeah. Now, there are a number of ways that anxiety can be triggered in the body. And one is through there's 3 pathways, what I call the conscious pathway, the subconscious pathway, and the biofeedback pathway.
Okay.
The subconscious pathway is when we've had something happen to us in the past that part of our brain, the amygdala, has recognized as being a threat. And this is below
would that be normally?
That could be, well, it could be any one of a number of things. So let's say, for example, you might have a fear of dogs, for example. You might have had
maybe your dog,
you may have had when you were much younger, had an experience with a dog and it wasn't very pleasant.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I get
But you
that.
don't necessarily consciously remember this. It's in there in the subconscious. So now every time that your brain recognizes a dog, it goes back to that emotional feeling of terror of your first encounter of a dog. So now you have this phobia of dogs, for example, right? That's just one. So you might be triggered into your stress response every time that you're around a dog. It could be a spider. It could be a snake. It could be any one of a number of things, right? Sometimes you'll have experiences that you won't remember and you're not even aware of what the trigger is. The trigger could be an environment. Last time I was in a room with this amount of people in it, I had a stress response. So the brain remembers that. Therefore, next time you find yourself in a similar environment, you get a similar stress response.
So it anchors your state at that particular time. A smell can trigger off or anything.
Absolutely anything. Yeah. And you don't have to consciously be aware of it. So you'll be somewhere. It could be on a bus. It could be a train. It could be an event. It could be anything. It could be a doctor's waiting room, whatever. Yeah. And all of a sudden you start to get all of these feelings of stress and anxiety and panic attacks. And you're kind of going, well, I don't know.
Where did that come from?
Where'd that come from?
Yeah, yeah. No, I can see that.
Your brain has just linked up that these environmental triggers mean, boom, stress response. So that's the subconscious pathway.
Okay.
The conscious pathway is a lot of what was triggered for me in the past is when we think ourselves into stress. So we get a habitual way of thinking. And if that has a negative lens on it, negative filter on it, we then start so when I was sitting at my desk working away and I'd be going about my job and I wouldn't have much faith in it, my brain is automatically thinking, okay, well, right, this isn't going to work out, which means you're not going to make money, you're going to lose money, which means potentially you could lose your job, which means that you're now going to be out of work, which means how you're going to pay your mortgage, which means how you're going to afford which means, oh my God, what else is going to happen? You won't be able to do this. And then all of a sudden, just one thought sitting at a desk, has triggered a picture in your brain that, well, you're now going to be destitute.
End of the world.
Yeah.
Type scenario.
Catastrophizing your thinking.
I'm sure
the
this
whole time.
resonates in lots of people's minds hearing this because whether you open up to this or whether you keep it inside or whatever, everyone goes through this, whether you're the strongest man in the world or whatever it might be and you think you're big and powerful, we all get these thoughts. So what can you do?
Yeah, but it's a big on that. You're right. This strikes absolutely everybody. This is the core of what one of the messages that I'm trying to get out there to people is that it can strike anybody.
Yep.
And the people that come to see me, I have any age ranges from young kids up to, working professionals, doctors, lawyers, accountants, manual laborers, construction workers, retired people. It can strike anybody at any age. And the thing about it is, and this is where the whole idea of the stigma, for me, looking back on it, I should never have bought into this idea of the stigma. The reason being is when I actually learnt what anxiety was and the skills that I needed to learn in order to overcome it, I ended up being not just a stronger person as a result of not having stress and anxiety, but stronger than other people who had never experienced stress and anxiety because now I knew how to control my own mind.
Brilliant.
A lot of people who don't suffer from stress and anxiety for whatever reason, they just fall into a lucky category. They've never had to learn those mind skills.
Of course.
So for me, it's become like, I used to think of it as my superpower, right? So, for people who are suffering from stress and anxiety for whatever reason, they're now given an opportunity to learn more about their mind and they become, rather than being 100%, they're now 110, 120% of what they were before they ever suffered from it. They have this extra level of skills. And those skills aren't just to be applied to not suffering from anxiety and stress. Those skills are applied.
So tell me how you've mastered your mind in a good way now. And I can hear the language that you're using now. So strike me the difference between yourself and going to a psychologist as an example, or going to someone that you're constantly speaking to, you see them every week and you talk about the same stuff and you get yourself back into the same anxiety week in, week out. And like the therapist or whoever is seeing you week in, week out, they're just taking your money, really. So why are you different from them?
Well, I'll put it this way. What works for, there's some people that go to counseling for anxiety, and some people get a lot out of that. Yeah. So it works for some people. It doesn't work for everybody. Some people learn mindfulness, and that works for somebody. It doesn't work for everybody. Or meditation, or they'll do Reiki, and a lot of people will find that that will work, and they'll get success out of those things, or they make certain changes in their life or their lifestyle. What happens when people come to me, and this is the power of the idea of using the 3 pathways, which is if your anxiety is triggered through your conscious pathway, there are a set of skills and tools and techniques that you need to learn in order to shut that down. Okay. If it's triggered through your subconscious pathway, there are a different set of tools and techniques that are needed to shut that down. And the same if it's triggered through your biofeedback pathway, which we didn't get into in much detail. Now, if you're lucky and you go along to somebody, a practitioner of some sort, and they teach you a skill that happens to match the pathway that your anxiety has been triggered on.
Right, okay.
That's fantastic. That will work for you. Now, most people don't understand the different, when I say most people, most practitioners, therapists don't understand the difference between the 3 pathways.
Of course.
So it's kind of pot luck as to whether that'll work. But what generally happens then is if you only shut down, if you only shut down one of the pathways, you leave the other 2 pathways open for your anxiety and your stress to return. Okay. Right? What you need to do is to understand the 3 different pathways and the tools that are used for shutting those down. You need to be able to match the tools to the pathway, because if you don't do that, your anxiety is much more likely to return.
Okay.
And that causes, this is where it causes a lot of stress for people when that happens. Because what they do is they go, I tried this. I tried mindfulness. I tried Reiki.
Even the word tried. Even the word tried.
And it didn't work. Yeah. And as a result of that, they then say, it didn't work. So therefore, that means my anxiety is really bad. I can't be helped. I've tried all of these things. There's no hope for me. And that sends them into another anxious spiral, because they think, mind starts going forward and saying, what's the rest of my life going to be like if I can never overcome this? And they actually start to get even more stressed. Yeah, so they're more anxious. So understanding, that's why the most important part of this whole process is understanding what's going on in your mind, in your brain, in your body when anxiety strikes. And if you can understand that, even just that first step, it takes away a lot of the fear. It takes away a lot of the stigma, because you go, oh, look, because most people think when they start suffering from something, a mental health disorder, whether it's chronic stress or anxiety or depression, they think, oh, there's something wrong with me that can't be fixed. And I don't even understand it. So if I don't understand it, how can I explain to somebody? How can I get it fixed?
And badly enough, and I have to say this, a lot of people go to the doctor and then the doctor doesn't really understand because they're a general practitioner, and then they say, "Oh, take these drugs."
End up on medication. Yeah.
Which I don't think, in my head anyway, I don't think that resolves what it is, the challenge that you're going through.
Yeah. Well, because what the medication do, and there's a number of very common ones, whether it's the sertraline or things like that, or even the Xanax. What they do is they take away the symptoms. Right. Of course. They mask the symptoms. Yeah, they don't deal with the underlying problem. The anxiety is still there trying to get out. It's because the brain and the mind still recognizes that stress and or that threat, and it's trying to protect you.
So it clouds it over a little bit.
Clouds it over, but it's still struggling to get out, which I always equated to, those warning lights on the dashboard that tell you there's something wrong with your engine. Right. Well, that's what you go along to the doctor with. You said, I have something that's showing as a warning light. Right. And when he gives you medication, that's the equivalent of taking a hammer and smashing the warning light. and saying, there you go, problem solved.
Yeah.
You still have the underlying issue. You just don't have those warning signals of the symptoms telling you that something's wrong. And then what happens is the medication, because our body starts to build up tolerance to the medication. So you go back and what happens? Well, the doctor said, we'll up the dose a bit.
Yep.
And maybe up the dose, maybe that works for a while. And then all of a sudden you're on a higher dose and a higher dose and a higher dose.
And you're addicted to them because that's all you know.
That's all you know.
Yeah.
That's all you know. Yeah. You have to, and also if you stop taking them, you know your anxiety's coming back.
Yeah. Cause all in your head. Yeah. If I don't take it's that placebo effect, isn't it?
Yeah. And so you're then stuck dependent upon these in order for your own mental health.
Yeah,
and then sometimes they go, okay, well, they're not working. Let's try a different one. And that one doesn't work. And then all the while you still actually have the underlying anxiety. It's reinforcing this idea that you have a mental health issue rather than what you actually have is you have a lack of skills, awareness and understanding of
and
what's
to take
happening.
it. To really understand. And for what you do is you meet that person or those people in their world.
Yeah.
And open up the pathway to see the light at the end of the tunnel so they can crawl through the tunnel and then they can go through to the other side and see the light and climb out of it feeling a lot better about themselves. So that's something that you do in a metaphor.
Yeah. And practically what it is, here are the skills, here are the tools, here are the techniques. This is why it's happening in your life. This is what it means. And these are the steps that you need to take in order to take back control of your mind. And that, it works. And the reason that it works is because on a neurological level, we are all actually the same. We've got into habitual ways of thinking, whether they're subconsciously or whether they're consciously. We've gone into these habitual ways of thinking. And the brain it's what's known as plastic. It can change. Right. So what we need to do is we need to learn those skills to change, to effectively rewire our brain. Every time that we have a thought, a number of neurons fire off. And if we have those thoughts repeatedly, we have the same thought repeatedly, those neurons, the strength that built up a neural net, it's known. And that neural net gets insulated by stuff called myelin sheath, right? Which is a fatty.
That's an interesting word.
It's a fatty sheath that insulates it because it's.
Do you say sheep or sheep?
Sheep.
It's wonder what the sheep were doing in your head. I always wondered that for years.
And that makes those thoughts easier to access.
Okay.
Consciously or subconsciously, right? So what happens is, and when it comes to, when it comes to the mind, it's survival of the most active. Right? Not the fittest, not the best. It's survival of the most active. So if we're using those neural nets the most often, they're the ones that become stronger.
Okay.
So we have to learn the skills that stop us using those conscious or subconscious thoughts and build new, more positive ones. Now, this all sounds really technical, but it's not a difficult process. It's a simple process. There's just a certain set of skills that you need to learn. And when you do that, you're teaching your brain how to build new, more positive neural nets. And if you do that repeatedly and consistently, what happens? Survival of the most active, the new ones start to grow and build and be reinforced, and the other ones start to wither and atrophy.
That's really interesting because that works in a lot of other places in life, like 21 days to make a habit.
Yeah.
You know, it's exactly the same as your brain and your mind. 21 days to make a new habit. But the good thing is, and the key thing that you've done, you've made it work for yourself really well. And you can apply this fantastic tools, techniques, or whatever you do to other people to see where they're at and get them out of the positions where they are in, to make their lives a lot better.
Yeah, I've yet to come across a hopeless case, which is great to say. Everybody suffering from stress, anxiety, can make huge positive steps forward quickly and easily with this approach. It's worked for me. It's worked for countless others. It works for, and as I said, these aren't difficult. These are actually skills that, I've started to teach my 6-year-old daughter to use.
Brilliant.
They're that easy. Now, they're a bit more sophisticated when I'm dealing with an older mind, but
yeah, of course.
But and that's the kind of world that I'd like us to evolve into, one where every school kid starts to learn these skills and techniques, because that has a multiplying effect. You can reduce. We have a mental health epidemic in this country.
I think it's being talked of a lot more now than it was 20, 30 years ago, where as yourself, you were carrying this baggage on your shoulders and you kept it quite internal and you didn't want to be speaking about it or whatever. But now, which is good, that it's coming out a little bit more open. There's less stigma to it. And people like the likes of Google's nowadays, they have their mindfulness days and they have this, that and the other, which really help develop their staff. But again, it's as we suggested earlier, it's has to be re-educated into the education system in a better way. Yeah.
And if we can do that, I do talks regularly in schools now to younger children, but also to parents' associations as well. And it's great to see. I'm always delighted the sense of understanding and kind of revelation when you start to talk. And I have a little exercise that I do with people it takes about 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And it's an entertaining way of explaining exactly what's going on. And it's amazing. I'm always amazed. I shouldn't be, because I was that soldier, at how many people don't understand exactly what's going on when stress strikes. And it's a skill. What it is a skill that we need to learn. And if we learn it easily and early enough, it stops it becoming so ingrained in the subconscious.
And manifests.
That it becomes a greater problem for us. And that's where we need to be tackling this issue in society. And if we can do that, we'll make massive, massive strides against this mental health problem in modern society.
Wow. I'm very impressed. It's been really, really interesting. What I'd like to do is, how do people find you? What's the best way to get hold of you?
Yeah, there's a number of different ways. You can come onto my website, TheMindCoach.ie.
Brilliant website name.
Thank you. Or you can, if somebody's working listening to this from a professional point of view, from a corporate point of view, criticalfrequencycoaching.com is the website for my corporate work. And so info at The Mind Coach if you want to email me. And I can be also contacted on, best number to get me on is 019012050 or 08624595530. I'm also active on Facebook. You'll find me under The Mind Coach on Facebook. And what else? Oh, yeah. If people want to learn more about this whole idea of the stress response and the different pathways in the mind, I also have a webinar. You'll be able to sign up for it on my website under TheMindCoach.ie/webinar, or Webinar UK if you're listening to it in the UK. And what that is, it's about an hour-long webinar. It's called Eliminating Anxiety Without Therapy or Medication.
Brilliant.
And you can register for that. It's a free webinar. I do, and I'll make you aware of this now, I do make an offer on that webinar for an online version of my program, the 3 Pathways approach, which is being very successful. People are using that online program to actually overcome their anxiety and their stress, and it's been hugely successful in terms of the results that it's achieving, which is fantastic. And
I've been through it, and it's really good. It's definitely worthwhile you having a look at this. It's I'd highly recommend it from anyone's point of view.
Super. Super. Well, this has been a great conversation. Thanks a million, Jason, as my guest host for today. That's the end of Minding Minds podcast for this episode. So you can catch us on iTunes, on SoundCloud, and also on YouTube. And keep your eyes peeled. Subscribe so you can stay up to date. And thank you for listening to the Minding Minds podcast.
Thank you.